The event is going to be about an hour and a half. Not about. It's going to stop. It's going to finish at 7:30. We're starting at 6. 7:30 we finish. So we're gonna interview Nicole, and then we're gonna open the stage for you guys for questions and answers. And I think we're gonna start. So Nicole, are you here? Itai, can you unmute Nicole?
I'm here.
Oh, great. And in the middle. That's cool. So I think we have enough people to start. We have 61 people and counting. I think around 150 registered, so we're optimistic. So we're going to start. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for another episode of the podcast Al-Halal. I'm Ben-Zaav, and today we're going to have a very special guest with us, or we have a very special guest with us, Nicole Stott, the astronaut. Hi, Nicole. It's a great privilege having you.
That was good. That rhymed. Nicole Stott, the astronaut. That's good.
That is true. I didn't think of that. As I said, we're going to have an interview with Nicole and then some Q&A from the audience. I'll start by introducing you, Nicole. And Itai, if you can just mute wherever you see that somebody's microphone is on, wherever that is. So Nicole Marie Passono Stott, hopefully I said that correctly. She's an American engineer and a retired NASA astronaut. Nicole served as a flight engineer on the International Space Station, the ISS, Expedition 20 and 21, and was a mission specialist on space shuttle missions STS-128 and STS-133. Nicole retired in 2015 after 27 years of working at NASA. And Nicole enjoys flying, painting, woodworking, gardening, scuba diving, and snow skiing. That makes you sports junkie and an arts junkie, I don't know. And last but not least, Nicole is a mother, and she's married to Christopher Stott, an American space entrepreneur. So Nicole, it's great having you here with us.
Nice to be here.
You were about 4 years old when Star Trek, the original series, came out, and about 7 years old when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. Did these events or others influence your connection to space, or maybe your desire to become an astronaut? Were you a space geek from childhood?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe even without knowing it, I kind of credit my parents who shared what they loved with me. And my dad was definitely a Star Trek watcher. So from as young as I can remember, Star Trek was on the TV. And I have vivid memory of watching the moon landing on our black and white TV with our family, and then, heading outside and looking at the moon and thinking about people there and stuff. But it was a long time, I think, before I started thinking that astronaut could be any possibility. That was well into the time when I was, already working for NASA that I even started considering it as a possibility for myself.
Okay. Yeah. I got to say that the love for space, for me, was kind of the same. I grew up not a space geek or anything, and it caught me in my late period of life. Maybe there's still a chance for me to become an astronaut. I don't know.
Yeah, there's always a chance. There's always a chance. And, the older we get, the better it is from a radiation standpoint. So that works in our favor. But I'll tell you, it's so cool because I think there's things along the way, right, that influence us and we become inspired by them. And they're just becoming like part of who we are. We don't even necessarily realize that it's pointing us in one direction or another. And I don't know, my parents sharing that love with me. My dad he loved to fly. So flying was the thing that really got me thinking about stuff. And when I was studying aeronautical engineering at school, that's when I really realized that, wow, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And it just kind of went down this path of shuttle program starting back up again. And yeah, it worked out nicely.
Sure did.
Yeah.
So going back to actually your studies, you earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and a Master of Science in Engineering Management from the University of Central Florida. And this was probably in the mid-80s, 90s or something like that, if I calculated correctly.
Yeah, 80s.
Okay. Well, so here's a question for a lot of people that are listening right now or watching us right now. Why did you choose the path of engineering, and what brought you to study specifically engineering management?
Yeah, well, so the engineering really started out when I was getting ready to graduate from high school. I knew I loved flying. I knew I wanted to understand how things fly. But at that point, I really didn't even know if I was going to go to college or not. It became kind of the thing to do. My friends were going to college. I discovered that, well, maybe that's what you're supposed to do is go to college. And if you want to learn something more, it made sense, right? And I spoke to a counselor who told me about aeronautical engineering because I described to her that I was interested in knowing how things fly. And I had never heard of engineering before. Honestly, I had never heard of it. I'm thankful that nobody told me how difficult it is because I don't know if I would have just kind of blindly gone off and pursued it or not. But I did, and it was like just such the best decision to make. I mean, it fit so perfectly with what I was already curious about and wanted to know. And then it opened up this world of not just airplanes that fly, but how rocket ships fly. And the school that I went to that you mentioned, Embry-Riddle, is in Daytona Beach, Florida, which is just up the road from the Kennedy Space Center. And at the time I was going to school was when, the space shuttle program was really getting going. And when I graduated, it was when the space shuttle was starting to fly again after the Challenger accident. And all these young engineers came into Kennedy Space Center to work on the space shuttle program. And the engineering management path with the master's degree was more about the people that I worked for, our bosses, the management, the directors at Kennedy Space Center, seeing that, oh, wow, I've got all these young engineers that know the technical stuff coming in to work, but they need to understand more about like program management and how you plan, because that's really what we were doing. We were figuring out how do you get a space shuttle out of the hangar and onto the launch pad and ready to launch. And there's more than just technical in that. And so they encouraged us to participate in this program at University of Central Florida, which was a really wonderful, it just kind of rounded out the whole, world of stuff that flies in space and made it something that, could be doable for me from the standpoint of how do I help get a space shuttle out of the hangar and onto the launch pad, which was really fun too.
Sounds very cool. So
Yeah.
how many female classmates did you have in your studies? I mean, engineering and specifically engineering management weren't, and I guess still aren't really, things that are equally divided between women and men, and probably in the 80s or 90s less. So how was that back then?
Yeah, much less so. I think back then, as far like where I really noticed it was in my bachelor's program for aeronautical engineering. I think there was maybe one other time, one class where there was another girl in the class with me. I was always kind of the only woman, the only female in the bunch. But it's funny because even then, I think it's because I loved the subject so much. I really just wanted to be there and I was going to do my best that I really didn't think about it too much until afterwards. I didn't think about it unless somebody asked me about it, right? And the same was true later when I was the only woman on my spaceflight missions. But what I love is that the numbers keep growing and growing. I think young women are starting to see old women like me having done, done these things, being kind of these examples for them, perhaps, or at least a something that's present for them to see, hey, young women can do these things. There's no reason. I always like to say the rocket ship doesn't care if you're a boy or girl, right? It's more about where's your passion, what are you excited about, what do you want to be working on, and the astronaut office right now, on the U.S. side, there's roughly 40 active astronauts, and about 36% are women now, which is about double from when I started, and certainly is a higher percentage than what we see still in engineering programs. And I think women just need to be out there more and more, just being present for young girls to see that these kinds of things are possible. And the numbers will continue to grow.
Yeah, that's true. I went about a year ago, in December last year. I went to United States and I visited Stanford University, and I went to one of the departments there, one of the space engineering departments there, and they had in one of the corridors pictures of all the female astronauts that were students in Stanford. Yeah. And it was amazing because there was a long list of pictures. So I'm really happy that NASA is going that way, and probably other countries and other organizations as well. So moving on after your studies, or during your studies actually, after your bachelor's degree, you started your career as a structural design engineer with Pratt & Whitney, which is an American aerospace engine manufacturer. And you spent around a year over there, and then you moved on to work at NASA as an operations engineer in the orbiter processing facility in the Kennedy Space Center. Can you tell us a little bit about the orbiter processing facility, and what does an operations engineer do there?
Yeah, it sounds like all kinds of wacky words and stuff, but really it's exactly what I was saying before. We were a group of engineers all working to help make sure that everything was in place where it needed to be, that all the work had been done on the space shuttle so that it actually could be taken out to the launch pad and that astronauts could load up on it and go to space. And it was everything from, I describe it as like the orbiter processing facility. And what that really in short words is the hangar. That was the hangar where the kind of airplane looking part of the space shuttle was worked on. And, but we got to work out on the runway after landing. So getting the vehicle back into the hangar, we got to work, the ginormous building at Kennedy Space Center, the kind of iconic vehicle assembly building, that's 500 and something feet tall. And it's where all of the pieces of the space shuttle would come together before it rolled out to the launch pad. We got to work in there and in the launch control center, and really getting involved with every aspect of how you got a space shuttle ready to fly. And I think it was absolutely the best insight to both the hardware and in preparation of actually going to space myself one day.
Oh, that's actually, I have a question about this in a minute. That's interesting. In 1998, you joined the Johnson Space Center, where you served as a flight simulation engineer on the shuttle training aircraft. What was the shuttle training aircraft, and what was it used for?
Wow, that's a great question. And kind of that path to getting from Kennedy Space Center to Johnson Space Center, that was the time frame. It was probably about so it was about 9 years into when I was already working at Kennedy Space Center. And that was like, you talked about this long path to getting to this love of space and how it just was part of your life and stuff. The astronaut thing for me, when I started thinking about it, was seriously thinking, ooh, maybe I can do this, was about 9 years into working at Kennedy Space Center. And that's when, after seeing astronauts come through, that we were getting the vehicles ready for. And I realized, that 99.9% of an astronaut's job is not flying in space. And from as far as I could tell, about 80% of it was a lot like what I was already doing as a NASA engineer. And so that's when I started thinking, oh, maybe it's not just other special people that get to do this job. Maybe I can consider it. And I know this is a long story getting to the Johnson Space Center thing, but it's because that was the point where I started thinking I could consider being an astronaut. And so I spoke to some people I consider to be mentors. They encouraged me to do the one thing that I had total control of in the process, which was to pick up the pen and fill out the application. And I did that, and I thank them all the time. And I actually got an interview after my first application, but I didn't get selected to be an astronaut. But they offered me a job at the Johnson Space Center, flying on this airplane that you described, the shuttle training aircraft, which, while I was disappointed that I didn't get picked to be an astronaut, honestly, I didn't think I would get picked to be an astronaut. So I was like, holy moly, they're asking me to come work at an airport on this really cool airplane that's used to train astronauts how to land the space shuttle. So for a person who wanted always to know how things fly and to fly herself, honestly, I didn't think it could get any better. And so in short, what that airplane was this modified corporate jet that was used to train the astronaut pilots how to land the space shuttle. And so day after day, I got to fly with astronauts, training them to do this, becoming familiar with how the space shuttle lands, and just getting to fly in really cool airplanes almost every day as part of my job.
Wait, so by
so
then...
I was happy.
So by then you were already a pilot, or did you study to become a pilot after that?
I had earned my private pilot's license right out of high school. So I knew I always wanted to do that. So I took a little time to do that right out of high school, and then carried that with me forward. I never was in the military. I was always a civilian, but I did love the flying, wanted to fly, kept flying. And as part of that job as a flight engineer on the shuttle training aircraft, I was also able to fly in like the back seat of the T-38 jets, those little 2-seat jets, trainer jets. And so I got a lot of flying time that way as well, myself as kind of the co-pilot in that airplane, which was
cool,
really awesome.
So you told us a little bit about the point in time where you decided that you want to become an astronaut. And in 2000, you were selected for astronaut training. Can you tell us a little bit about the training itself? What does one need to become an astronaut,
Well, it's funny because I look back now and I look at, there's this one picture that I always think of, it was my astronaut class picture. So every astronaut comes in as a group, you come in as a group of astronauts, and my class was the class of 2000, like you mentioned, and we were the 18th group of NASA astronauts, and there were 17 of us. And when you ask about what do you have to do to become an astronaut, I mean, I look at that group of people and I think, wow, NASA has set criteria for the kind of education you have to have with, kind of sciencey, engineering, math, technical background, and a little bit about the work experience you have to have. And then of course there's medical requirements, vision and other things that you have to pass. But what I love about it is that generally otherwise it's pretty wide open. And when I look at the people I was selected with, I mean, you've got pretty much every area of science covered. I was an aeronautical engineer. You have medical doctors, an oceanographer, geophysicist, fighter pilot and test pilots. What else did we have? A biologist, this just mix of backgrounds, both education and work-wise. And then perhaps more importantly, these just really diverse experiences that all of the people had had, both in work and education, or education and work, but also in the things they love to do outside of that, rock climbers and chefs and artists and musicians and race car drivers and water skiers and, just this really interesting blend of humanity, I think, that ultimately makes for a really nice crew when you get selected, for a mission to go to space. But as far as the training goes, I mean, it's everything you can imagine. It's a lot like going back to school. We spend a couple of years learning all about the spaceships that we might fly on. For me, that was the space shuttle and the International Space Station and the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. And we learn how to do spacewalks and fly the robotic arm and all about the different kinds of science that are going to be performed, during the missions. And then I would have to say that the most difficult thing for me was learning to speak Russian, because everybody has to be able to speak English and Russian as part of the program. So yeah, that was the most difficult.
Interesting that actually that was the part. But I guess when you're younger, it's easier to learn a language than when you're older.
Yeah, and I was old. I mean, I was already in my late 30s when I was selected, and yeah, I kind of blame my mom. I'm like, how did I get all the way through school, university, everything, without ever taking a single language course? Not Spanish, not German, nothing, nothing. And your brain, yeah, I think our brains get wired very differently as they get older. The kind of the willingness to accept. I argued it every step of the way, but I'm very thankful for it though too. I'm really, really thankful to have learned that language and to have gotten to know, my crewmates a little bit better because I was able to speak their language too.
Yeah. So after completing these 2 years of training and evaluation, you were assigned technical duties, including supporting astronauts and Capcom, which means being in the Mission Control Center and communicating with astronauts during their missions. Did you get to meet Ilan Ramon back then? Because I think he flew in 2003, so I'm guessing he was training for the flight maybe during the time that you were there.
Yeah, and he was awesome. I mean, he was, part of one of so he was in the 98, maybe just the class before me, 98 or 96. And and I had met him even before becoming an astronaut because he was coming over to train. And when I was flying on the shuttle training aircraft, I would get to meet a lot of the people in the astronaut office too, of course. But yeah, just a joy to know him and his family. Yeah, that was a real, that's one of the best things about the astronaut world now is that it's not just the US doing US things. It's not just Russia doing Russia things. It's not just any of the individual partners that are at least part of the International Space Station program off independently doing it. I mean, it really is this cooperative partnership. And the opportunity to meet people from all of the countries that were participating, even for short missions. I mean, it just opens up the world to you in a whole new way and really does make you realize that, I mean, it's like, holy moly, we live on a planet, we're Earthlings. It's all kind of this, really unifying thing.
Yeah, and I think every astronaut I heard in every TV show or meetup like this or whatever always says that one of the things he or she took from being in space is looking at Earth and seeing this borderless planet. And right, I mean, from there, it's very peaceful. There are no borders.
Yeah.
Everything's...
It is. And somebody has a really beautiful, let's see if I can see it. Jonathan has a really beautiful picture up as a screensaver here. And what it reminds me of is when you think about borders, I mean, what you see from space up there, the only border that matters is that thin blue line, like it's in that picture right now, that thin blue line of atmosphere that's kind of the hull of our spaceship, right? It's like the thin middle hull of the station. It's protecting the Earth from all of that deadly vacuum of space, and it's keeping us all, as safe and secure as we can be in here. And when we decide to treat each other well and the planet itself, it's a pretty wonderful place.
True. So I'm going to take us back to Earth, and I wanted to ask: do you feel that supporting astronauts and being Capcom or other duties like this, is it necessary for becoming a better astronaut or a good astronaut?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I don't know that you need to do it as long as we end up doing because there's so few space flights that you end up doing that for a long time. But I think it is critical. I think as a professional astronaut, perhaps, I'll say that. Because I think there's just subtleties to the way we have to communicate when you're on a spaceship and you're in a mission control center. You're not necessarily seeing each other. The work is pretty intense. Excuse me. So I think you have to develop kind of a skill for how you're going to communicate that way and understand, the feelings of the different people that are involved. Certainly for me, Capcom allowed me to do that from a communication standpoint, but it also gave me a totally new and important, I think, perspective on how the space station worked, how the crews work together, how the hardware works. I mean, every day if we were working, helping the crews on board with a task that was part of a system or some experiment they were doing, we had the same procedures out on, our desk looking at it just like they did in space. So I was getting all of that kind of working knowledge as well. I think it's hugely beneficial. And then anytime you can be interacting with the training team or the mission control team or interfacing with the hardware and the training activities is just going to put you in a better position to do a good job when you're in space.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
On August 28, 2009, you were launched to the International Space Station aboard the Discovery Space Shuttle with the crew of STS-128. You stayed aboard the ISS for 3 months, and you participated in a 6.5-hour spacewalk during that mission. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of being out there above Earth with nothing but maybe a tether connecting you to the shuttle and or to the ISS and falling at around 20,000 kilometers an hour? Because it
Yeah.
sounds like a hell of a ride to me.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything about it is, if I can use your words, a hell of a ride. It's like the getting to space, the fact that we launch and in 8.5 minutes we've gone from the launch pad to orbiting the planet. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And then just to live and work there for any period of time, there's major complexity in that. And yeah, you're traveling at 20,000 kilometers an hour, and it's like, you lap the planet every 90 minutes, And the same is true when you're in your own little personal spaceship and you're out doing a spacewalk, right? You're still traveling at that same speed.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it doesn't ever feel like it's this, zipping by kind of thing. I think that would be really, really distracting if it did, disorienting. But it's this motion of the planet. But I'll tell you, everything about flying in space, you could use the word surreal to describe it. I mean, I know I did it now, but I have to think about it, convince myself that I really did. And a spacewalk is one of the surrealist of all the things I think that you can do. And I think it's because you really and truly are out in space, yes, tethered. I mean, you're very diligent about maintaining that tether to the station, but you realize that between you now and this vacuum of space is this little spaceship, this spacesuit that you're wearing. The spacesuits look, the visor on the suit looks really big, when you just look at the suit from the outside. But when you're in it, it's taken your world down, really, your view down to just this. And it's funny because people think, oh, you can just move around, look your whole body and everything. But if you just turn your head inside the spacesuit, all you see is the inside of the spacesuit. You don't see anything else. You have to rotate your whole body to be able to look left or right or up or down. And so really and truly, you've got this very kind of closed in view. But at the same time, if you look down at Earth, it's like from that closed in view, it's like the whole planet is, you know, spreading out in front of you. And really, I wish I would have gotten the chance to do a second spacewalk, because then I think my brain might have registered more details, more like particular memories of it. But what I have now is just kind of this blanketed memory of having been out there, experiencing that kind of sensation, doing the work, you know, somehow getting through the getting through the work, riding the end. I got to ride on the end of the robotic arm from the end of the space station down into the payload bay of the space shuttle. And that was like 25 minutes of being out like the farthest from the planet, you know, just on this arcing ride from the station down into the payload bay, and never feeling like I was moving. I mean, I felt like I was just standing there hanging onto this box that on the ground would have weighed about 1,000 pounds, but up there, you know, it's nothing. Just hanging onto this thing. And the station moved out of my view, and Earth kind of rotated in my view. And then out of nowhere, this payload bay of the space shuttle kind of popped up. And it was just the most peaceful, I don't know, just almost meditative, kind of transcendent experience to be out there and consider myself in that place, and quiet and comfortable. And I remember at one point having to think, okay, don't fall asleep. You don't want to be the one that naps on the end of the arm. It was just so nice. And then it was over. I was back inside, and I'm like, holy moly, how'd that happen?
6.5 hours, just like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Which, as you can imagine, during it, you know, there were times where it felt like, oh my gosh, you know, how long has it been? Or how long have we been out here? How much longer do we have to go? And then it's like a lot of things where it gets done and you're thinking, wow, did I really do that? How, you know, how'd that time go by? Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And your second space flight was on the STS-133, which was one of the last flights of the space shuttle. What were your roles in general? What were your roles on the space shuttle and on the ISS?
So on the ISS, I was, you know, they have kind of different classifications. So I was called a flight engineer on the space station. And that just means you're a crew member on the space station and you get to do some of everything. And that's one of the great things about, you know, being an astronaut right now, is that it really is jack of all trades. You're the plumber, you're the scientist, you're the spacewalker, you get to fly the robotic arm, you get to communicate with the ground. It's really just this everyday different mix of all of those kinds of things, right? On a space shuttle mission, it's a little bit more prescribed, in that, you know, you're going up there, you have just 2 weeks to get, you know, your mission complete, all of the tasks done. Everybody's assigned, you know, different roles as part of the crew. And for that flight, I was, for launch and landing, I was up on the flight deck with the pilot and commander. So I sat between them and acted kind of like I did on the shuttle training aircraft as the flight engineer between the two of them, you know, managing the checklist, coordinating the stuff that was going on, and keeping track of, you know, anything that might be going wrong too, you know, just like they do in airplanes even. And then I also had the chance to fly the robotic arm again, you know, to move things around on the outside of the station, take them out of the payload bay and attach them to the station, flying the robotic arm. On this mission, I wasn't the one doing the spacewalks, but I was the one that got to be inside, bossing the guys around outside as they did their spacewalks. So that was a really cool perspective to have, having done one myself and now being, you know, kind of the eyes and ears and, you know, choreographer, I guess, for Al and Steve when they were outside. Science, I mean, again, all of it, but we all had kind of our thing that we were tasked with. Yeah, 2 weeks goes by very fast. I can tell you, as the second trip to the space station, 2 weeks did not seem long enough. I mean, 3 months wasn't long enough, honestly.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of the 133 mission, there's this video where we're getting ready to, as the shuttle crew, to go back onto the space shuttle, and we were going to close the hatches between the shuttle and the station. And we always do this kind of ceremony, this goodbye ceremony with the station crew and the shuttle crew, and videotape it all, of course, and talk to the ground. And all of my crewmates, except for the commander, of the shuttle had gone back onto the space shuttle. And in the video, it's so funny. My commander is at the hatch, and you see me, actually physically see me in the video, kind of floating back towards the station side, you know, and in this big wave of his hand, like, all right, come on, you know, you got to go, and pulling my clawing fingers off the hatch. But it's an amazing place. It's such a special place that, I mean, I really wish everyone, if they wanted to, could have the chance to, you know, just float in that place and see Earth that way and work as a crew that way and see just how beautiful a model it is, really, for how we should be living together here on Spaceship Earth.
I think that some of our viewers right now, they have a chance, because I see a lot of kids here in the audience, which is very cool. And, you know, one day, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I say to them, you know, and, you know, the little thing I tack on to the end is, if you go, could you take me with you?
I heard a talk a few years ago by Dan Barry, who was another retired astronaut, and he told the story of how he became an astronaut, and it took him about 13 attempts to become an astronaut. 13 times he registered, and they said no. 13 times. He started when he was in bachelor's degree, then master's degree, then his PhD. At a certain time, he didn't have anyone to vouch for him because he was like a professor already, right? And then he said, like, the bottom line of his talk was that if you want to do something and people tell you that you can't, he said, I wouldn't do that, but he said, just spit in their face and go and do it. So maybe you know him. So
I do. I can't imagine him spitting in anyone's face, quite honestly.
True.
Yeah.
Very, very kind.
Yeah.
But to the young people here, if you have a dream, you know, just do it. A lot of people would say to you on your way, you can't do it. You're too young. You're just dreaming. Virtually spit in their face and go and do it.
Don't listen to that kind of stuff. You need to find, you can always, like, just turn a little bit more and there's going to be somebody that's going to lift you up, right? You don't need to get caught up in the negativity, right? And that's true for anything, I think. And I really believe, I mean, this might sound kumbaya or something. I don't know. It's just like, I really believe just like that class, when I think about my class of astronauts, I mean, everybody paid attention to what they enjoy. Everybody figured out what they were curious about and just kept wanting to learn more about that and do more associated with that. You know, and yes, maybe with the idea that astronaut could be a goal associated with it. But I also know that every single person in my class, if they never got picked to be an astronaut, they would be doing amazing things now. They would be still working towards how whatever they could do could be helping make things better here on Earth for all of us, which I think ultimately is where you find your greatest joy, right? And the opportunities just open up when you're paying attention to what you enjoy, applying that, and then, you know, connecting with these people that will lift you up in that as well.
So talking about doing things that you love, you retired from NASA in 2015, and since then you're pursuing your next adventure, which is being a full-time artist, painter, sculptor, and writer. On your website, that's called Earth from Space, it says Nicole Stott, artist, astronaut, earthling, which I think that says everything about how you see yourself these days. What influenced when you were in space? What influenced you and brought you to the decision to dedicate your time to art, and you know how you spend your life right now?
Well, I think a couple things. I think one, I was really fortunate to. I painted while I was in space. I brought a little watercolor kit with me and was able to paint. And at the time, I just thought about it as a way to do something I enjoyed doing on Earth while I was in space, right? And then it was absolutely, I think about it now, it's like, these are the kinds of things that really, we're not just working in space now, we live there. And so these are the kinds of things that help us kind of put the human in human space flight, you know, doing what we enjoy while we're there as well. And when I was considering retiring, which is a difficult decision to do when you're voluntarily taking yourself out of, out of from the opportunity to fly in space again, right? And in the grand scheme of things, I probably would have flown already again since then. So it's a difficult decision to make, but I really, in my heart, was feeling like it was the one to do. And it's been, it absolutely was the right thing to do. But as I was considering it, I kept coming back to that opportunity to paint in space. And I knew I was going to do art myself anyway, if nothing else, just for fun. And I thought, this could be an interesting way to share the spaceflight experience with everyone, including people who don't even have a clue we have a space station, right? There are people that honestly don't know that for the past 20 years, we've had people, representing 15 different countries living peacefully, successfully, continuously on this space station. And people should know about that. So if I could use art as kind of this communication tool to give them that backstory, whether they like my art or not important, but, to share that I think is really important. And the messaging of, we live on a planet, we're all Earthlings, only border that matters is that, thin blue line. I think art allows that kind of outreach. And then, you see this art spacesuit behind me. I think the thing that became even more important for me was this opportunity to tie my love of space, the inspiration that can really come from it, I think, and my love of art together, working with kids all over the world, including some kids from Israel, and creating these space-themed art therapy projects. And I honestly feel like, I honestly, like you just said, my next adventure, my next mission in life is doing this. And it's bringing me, you just have, when you feel something inside and know it's right, this is it. And, primarily we work with kids in pediatric cancer centers and refugee centers and very rural schools around the world. And we've had the opportunity to work now with kids in over 50 countries. And, through bringing their art together through something like a spacesuit, and the company that makes our real spacesuits, ILC Dover, has been on board with us all the time. They quilt the kids' art together. And we've even had the chance to send, a couple of these suits up to the space station and back, and the kids see their art,
cool.
that way. And yeah, it's incredible. And along the way, we formed a foundation called the Space for Art Foundation, because it's funny when you start reaching out to hospitals and, places around the world, and you just say, hey, we'd like to, have your kids paint with us on this project. And they're like, who are you? So it's good to have a group, an organization they can associate it with. So the Space for Art Foundation, check it out if you're interested.
We will, and I'm going to put that link in the podcast so people can find it. And is there any art that you can show us apart from that?
Yeah. So the suit behind me, this suit is called Unity, and we had built a couple suits with kids just in one hospital in Houston, and this suit is called Unity, and the intention was that it represent these relationships that we've developed through the International Space Station program. So we traveled to the 5 headquarter cities of the station program. We went to Moscow and Tokyo and Montreal and Cologne, Germany, and of course then in Houston, and we painted with kids in hospitals there. And then this suit flew up to the station. It's one of the ones that flew to the station. And then my own artwork, please don't judge me. It's purely experimental and never trained, but I love doing it. So, and I don't know how good it is. So this is, which way do I go? This way. This is a copy of the painting that I did on the space station. And it was inspired by a picture that I took of a little chain of islands on the northern coast of Venezuela called Las Rocas. And I remember when I looked at that view through the window, the first thing that crossed my mind was like, wow, it looks like somebody reached down with a big paintbrush and painted a wave on the ocean. And that one image, honestly, has been the inspiration for not just the painting I did in space, but a lot of the different kinds of art I've done myself, which primarily is all based on, some picture I took looking out the window of space. This other one, let's see, what do I got here? It's kind of a big frame, but it's in a little painting. So this is, I mean, I'm telling you, it won't look that great. This is my interpretation of a picture I took of the Bahamas, kind of the tropical waters, which I know it won't come through on the screen, but I mean, there is just the planet. There's just like this iridescence, this translucence to the colors, this glowing that I just had never experienced anywhere else, you know, to where the colors are almost seem different than, you know, the colors that I had known Earth to be. And I tried to find paints that allow me to, you know, bring that to life in some way, you know, in my paintings. And then this one is a little bit different. This is a painting based on a picture that my crewmate, that my crewmate Danny took of me while I was out on a spacewalk. So, so kind of a mix of Earth observation and then spacecrafty spacesuit stuff. But I tell you, I haven't had the chance to paint myself in a long time. I'm really looking forward to doing some of that again. And we've been continuously working with the kids on more projects. And then I guess it is kind of an artsy thing, but I've been finishing up the manuscript for my book, and that has, and for any of you out there that have written a book, are working on one, I mean, God bless you, because I understand the pain.
Yeah. So I have more questions, but I think I want to give the viewers more time to ask their questions. So this was very interesting and very inspiring for me. And I really want to let other people have their questions and get, you know, to know you a little bit more. So I think what we can do is, do we have a chat here? We have a chat. Or can we vote here? Let's see. Can you?
Let's not talk about voting.
No, not that kind of voting. I'm looking if the participants can raise their hands. Anyway, we'll find a way to do this in a minute. We did receive some questions via email before that. So Itai, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Cool. So Itai is here, and he has some questions we received through the email, and then we'll find a way to get people to ask the questions here as well.
But we have a question from Nika. Is she here?
Is Nika here?
Yes.
Oh, Nika is here. So, Nika, do you want to ask the question yourself, or do you want us to ask the question?
I can ask just a second. I'll open it. Just a second.
Itai, during the time that Nika opens her question, you can look in the chat and find the interesting questions that people wrote there. And if anyone has more questions here, write them in the chat and we'll let you just come online and ask your question.
Okay, I have the question. So I wanted to ask, well, if Nicole could tell about, like, in Big, I heard that she told about the way how she became an astronaut, and this is right now really inspired me. So I just wanted to know, how did she get her pilot license and maybe the scuba diving?
Yeah, you know, and one of the things that I like about both flying and scuba diving, and then, you know, I realized later as I became an astronaut where one of the most incredible training experiences I had was to go live underwater for 18 days on the Aquarius undersea habitat in preparation for going to live in space. And both of these places, you know, they each have their mission and what we do there. But it's just that each of these kinds of things provides you with this whole new perspective, right, on the world around you, right? So I just throw that out there for the flying and the scuba diving. For anyone that's interested in it, it's like scuba diving and the chance to live underwater. It's like you got to experience the planet, you know, surrounding you. and realize how much more goes on around us that we just don't necessarily realize on a day-to-day basis. And then to be in space, it's like you're surrounding Earth and you're looking at this macro view of this, you know, beautiful presentation of where we live. Things like scuba diving and flying both came along just as like general interests for me. Flying was something that, you know, my dad built and flew airplanes while I was growing up. That's where my passion for, you know, wanting to know how things fly came from. And I knew that even though I didn't want to fly as a pilot as my job, I knew I wanted to be a pilot for fun. And so I made a point of prioritizing that after I graduated from high school. And thankfully, one of the local community colleges that was in my neighborhood had a program where you could start studying the things you needed for your engineering degree, but they also had a way for you to work on your private pilot's license. And that's the way I did it. Very fortunate that it was a structured program to do it through. And then the scuba diving was just a bunch of friends and I talking about, wow, wouldn't it be cool to get our dive cert? And I am so thankful that I did that. Because like I said, I think these are just ways for us to experience the awe and wonder of our planet in a very similar way to what happens when you see Earth from space. Yeah. I'm a rambler. Sorry, you guys. I can never answer a question with a yes or no or
You answer the
or an
question.
answer. Thank you, Nika.
We have here,
איתי?
שומעים אותי?
Yep.
We have this question, and the question is, what did you feel in your ears when you entered to the atmosphere?
So what did I feel in my ears when I entered the atmosphere? So interestingly, we keep the spacecraft, you know, so the space shuttle was pressurized in a way that we didn't get like ear popping, like you might when you're descending on an airplane. It was very smooth. I don't remember feeling anything like, oh my gosh, we're descending and my ears are popping or feeling clogged in any way. So that's good. What you end up feeling in your ears though, because it's funny that our ears are the things that do this for us. But when you get back to Earth after being in space for a couple weeks or a few months, your body, you know, feels really, really heavy. I don't care who you are. I mean, everybody responds a little bit differently to coming back to gravity, but you feel really, really heavy. Like you have to think about holding your head up because you didn't have to do that for 2 weeks or 3 months. You know, it just gets held up in space. And you become more aware of how great a force gravity is on our bodies. And our ears are the things with those little hairs in them that help us, you know, balance and turn corners and, you know, respond and actually operate in this gravity environment. And so that's what I remember about my ears is always thinking that, wow, I hope those little hairs in my ears get calibrated sooner than later because then I'll feel like I can walk in a straight line instead of wobbling.
I have another. Can you describe how you felt during takeoff to space?
Yeah, we could talk all day about that one. It's really incredible. You know, on the space shuttle, it was about 7 million pounds of exploding, you know, rocket fuel, rocket thrust underneath you. And it's a pretty much a reality check in what 7 million pounds of exploding rocket fuel is. You've been out at the pad, you know, out in the spacecraft at the launch pad for a couple hours, you know, laying on your back, waiting as the countdown proceeded. The crew doesn't really get involved with countdown until about 20 minutes before launch. And then not really actively until about the last 5 minutes. And on the space shuttle, at about 6 seconds, you know, once you're into that iconic 10-9-8 thing, that's when you start thinking, oh, I might actually go to space today. And you've been laying on your back all peaceful, quiet. And at 6 seconds, that's when all the fuel in that big orange tank starts flowing to the 3 little engines on the back of the shuttle. And I always thought that would be really, really dynamic and really loud. but it wasn't. There was like a little bit of a vibration and a little bit of noise, and you felt the shuttle move a little bit. But at 0, when the big white solid rocket boosters lit, that's when it was like, holy moly, was I ever on a launch pad? It's like somebody slams you from behind and then starts piling 3 of you on top of you because you're accelerating and you're shaking like, I mean, the video doesn't show it. I mean, I remember just kind of chuckling at how much the inside of my body felt like it was shaking like jello, you know? And for about the first minute and a half, there's not a whole lot the crew can do. We're monitoring the systems, but you're not actively flying or pushing buttons or doing anything. And I think that was really good because as humans, our bodies need to respond to all that energy, right? And so I remember high-fiving my crewmate and this big smile coming on my face and like, woohoo, you know, you have to get that out, the little woohoo and stuff. And then 2 minutes goes by and those boosters separate, big bang, big flash, and now you're not shaken anymore, but you still feel like 3 people are sitting on top of you. And then another, 6 minutes goes by, and then the big orange tank separates, big boom, big flash, and then, I mean, then you're circling the planet. It's hard to believe in 8.5 minutes you could go from the launch pad to orbiting Earth at 5 miles a second. And you're in space and your body just, if you relax, your arms just kind of float up. You watch your pencil float up on the little string from your, knee board. Anything that wasn't tied down is floating up around you. And you cannot wait to get unstrapped and feel what that, that whole experience of floating and flying is going to be like. Yeah, incredible. Highly recommend it. Yeah.
Itai. There was another question I remember via email, and there are a lot of other questions here in the chat, but I'd love to let the people ask the questions. So can you point us out to the other question that came from the email and then find some questions in the chat and let the people ask them?
Yes, I found a Vered post. Is she here?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Hey, Vered, what's up?
Okay, hi. So my question is, I read that sometimes in space, astronauts has this experience of spiritual experience when they're over there. And so my question is, do you define also your experience as something spiritual? And do you think that words led you at the end to your current mission and career? And the second question is that we know that next SpaceX or the first SpaceX space tourist will be an artist, and he already bought tickets to artists. So would you like to go back to space now as an artist on this flight?
Okay, so first question, I personally felt like it was a spiritual experience. I mean, I already was a person of faith before flying, so it's not like I went to space and, there was this revelation of, oh, now I believe in God kind of thing. That was not the case. But I felt like the opportunity to, just to really experience Earth that way, to see it, not just see it, but feel it. Like, it's like anything special we do, it gets in us if it was really impactful, right? If it was really, having an influence on it, you feel it as well. You feel like it becomes part of you. And that was true for me. And I think it's because, not just because of the beauty I was seeing out the window and this, iridescence, the kind of the artsy side of looking at Earth, but it was more that I was in this place that probably the farthest I'll ever be, though in response to your second question, the answer is yes. And if you could get me there or to the moon, I would love it, and then I would go a little bit further. But at this point in my life, that's the farthest I've been separated from Earth, right? But I can tell you at that time, like looking out the window, there was this just sense of connection that I perhaps hadn't felt or understood that I was feeling when I had my feet planted on the planet, right? When I was firmly, on the ground. And that for me is where these, these three simple lessons, that we honestly, we learn them when we're what, 5 or younger, maybe, this idea that we live on a planet. I mean, we are all in space together already, right? On this planet. We are all Earthlings, and this, this sense of this significance of this thin blue line, and that every single thing, everyone, everything is interconnected in some way. And that was like the aha moment for me. But what I really love to share, I try to do it with my artwork. I try to do it, and it did influence me for sure. I mean, I feel like those things have to come out in the conversation that I have with people. I want everyone to find their way to experience that, and you don't have to go to space to do that. I mean, there is awe and wonder surrounding us everywhere on this planet, and we just have to open ourselves up to, perhaps looking at it in a little bit different way. And one of the ways I try to encourage people now is, I mean, I've always found this, and I would say spiritual kind of connective feeling from looking up at space too, being on the planet here and looking up at the stars, just kind of imagining this expanse that's really kind of unimaginable, right? Almost, to me at least, unexplainable. And now I do that, and I make a deliberate effort to think about my feet, how I am part of the planet. I think about my feet like the contact that it's making with the dirt and the earth, and then, look up and try to appreciate it. And just with this sense of who and where we all are in space together. Yeah. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Itai, what other questions do we have here? We have a lot. Man, the chat is full.
Based on your visual experience in space, what movie or computer graphics or maybe planetarium show looks like it does for being an astronaut?
Wow, there's here's one thing I'll share with you. That so when I came back to Earth, that's how I like to think about it. I've always tried to find like similar experiences to what kind of that transcendent feeling I was having looking out the window, and just getting sucked into that vortex of beauty that I was seeing out there. And the closest thing I could come from, and I did not do this before flying in space, is meditating. And also that, I guess, kind of earthing thing I was describing, feet on the ground, looking up to space. But one thing that gives you kind of the feeling too, like physically the feeling, if you ever have the chance to do this, is one of those float tanks, or the sea, the Dead Sea. Go out there, close your eyes, float, think about, move in that, and then meditate while you're doing that. That's the closest physical feeling I can get to what it was like to be in space. Movies and stuff, I think it's like every profession. You're always, as the astronaut, you're always really critical of any space movie that's out there. You enjoy it for the drama and the fun of it. I think while it wasn't, while the science of it, while the story of it was not very good, Gravity, the way they showed the movement of the astronauts, Sandra Bullock moving through the space station, the graphics that were used to show the light on the space station and the space shuttle, and kind of the movement of that felt all really, really good to me. And then there are, NASA has been working with a couple VR groups, one in particular, Felix and Paul. They're doing some really high resolution imagery on the station right now. And that's being put into these virtual reality and augmented reality and planetarium type shows that I think will probably be the most, I don't know, in kind of a surrounding sense, the closest to what it feels like to be there.
What objects did you bring to space?
Oh, I should have brought it out here. So not a lot of stuff. We get like a little bag about this big to bring personal items with. And that's where, the little watercolor kit I had, that went in there. I tried everything that I brought with me. I tried to select it based on something that I knew would provide someone here on Earth a connection, kind of a special connection to the experience I was having. The most important things on that list were for my son, who, when I flew the first time, was 7. And he gave me his little, kind of about this big, his little stuffed animal dog, little black and white dog named Sports that I flew with me actually on both flights. But that was the most special. Everything else was like pictures of family and friends that I could take a picture of there in space and then give them a picture of their picture, you know, that was in space. And a T-shirt for my high
I have
school
more
and things
questions
like
here.
that. Yeah.
Liran, is Liran here? Liran Kadshav?
Can.
Oh, Liran, you had a question.
Yes. Wait, I will find it. The question.
Anybody who wrote questions, look back in the chat what you
How
asked.
you
Because we might call you.
how you spend your most of the time in the space for this long time?
You know, it seems like a long time, but it really, the time went by very quickly. And that's because we have a lot of work to do. It's a mix, every day is a little bit different, you know, a mix of the different science experiments. I think when I was there was over 100 active research investigations going on that the crew, you know, has some level of involvement with. And sometimes we actually are the experiment, you know, the guinea pig that's part of the experiment. So that's a big part of your day. We have to maintain the space station as well. So if anything was to break or just need to be, you know, kept up, we were doing that. So you're the plumber, you're the electrician, you know, you're the, I don't know, the assembler of things. And we did a lot of outreach activities as well. So those were the, you know, the primary work things. And then every now and then there'd be a spacewalk or, you know, a need to move something around with the robotic arm as well. And then in the free time, I mean, we did have free time while we were there. And when you're there for 3 months, you know, I mean, you're living there. This is your home for 3 months. And so, you know, after dinner, you're going to, you know, watch a movie or exercise or talk to your family. That was really fun. We had very good communication with our families on the ground and friends. And I would say that most of the time, if an astronaut has free time, they are floating in front of a window, looking at Earth, taking pictures of Earth, just experiencing that, you know, that perspective, that from that vantage point that you know you won't always have. And if you weren't a photographer before you flew in space, you become one because you want to have the memories of it.
Very cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What did you eat in space?
What did I eat in space? I ate lots of things. So we, you know, what's really cool too about that is that, you know, this partnership between the 5 different space agencies, all of the countries provide, you know, food in one way or another. So there's a really nice mix of food up there. The thing is, it's not a lot like what we eat down here. And that's from a farm, you know, it's more like camping food. You know, some of it's like the military MREs, you know, the ready to eat packaged food. Some of it's dehydrated. Actually, most of it is. We suck all the water of it down here in Earth and then we add it back in space. But the mix of food is really nice. And I really loved the Japanese curries. They were just so good. And then of course our friends and family and some of our care packages, they send up loads of candy and treats for us to have too, which we probably shouldn't eat as much of, but you can play with those in space. You know, you can float a ball of water and put some M&Ms or gummy bears in there and, you know, show how to take gravity out of the equation and then suck it all up in one big gulp. Yeah.
Do astronauts sleep standing upwards?
Well, there's no up or down. You know, we have no sense of what is up or down. So I guess it depends on, you might call upwards if it aligned with what the overhead part of the station is. but we just float. You could float freely if you wanted, but nobody recommends that because you'll get stuck on Velcro somewhere, or your hair will get sucked into a fan or something. You don't want to do it. So on the space station, we all have individual crew compartments, and they're about the size of, if everybody remembers what an old phone booth size is, it's about that size. And we have a sleeping bag. You can stick it up on the wall, and you just float inside the sleeping bag. It's absolutely the best sleep I have ever had in my life. And but what's fun is, like, on the space shuttle, I would always, because we don't have sleep compartments, we would just put our sleeping bags anywhere we wanted around the crew compartment of the space shuttle. And I always chose what you would think of as the ceiling, because where else can you sleep on your ceiling except in space? That was always fun.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
How do you did your needs?
So say again?
How did you do your needs? How do you pee?
How do you go to the bathroom?
How do you go to the bathroom? Oh, okay. Well, hey, differently than here on Earth. So it's, as you imagine, everything floats. So we have, a separate private compartment that has the two components of the toilet in it. And I'll just use number 1 and number 2. I think that's universal language, right? So number 1, big long hose with a funnel at the end of it. And you would, float in, find a spot, turn this little switch on, and that would cause air to flow through the hose. And then, just like for number 1 and number 2, it's all about aim and speed. So you got to be, careful that you're actually aiming things properly, and that there's some speed control in all of it as well.
Just like bringing a rocket into orbit, right?
Yeah.
Speed.
Yeah. And it's funny because people ask this question, and I love the question, because I think it really represents that when we go and we live in this microgravity environment, things are different. And you have to consider all of these things, kind of the human things of it, as part of the adventure, right? And our brains and our bodies figure out very quickly how to live in new environments. And going to the bathroom in space is one of those things that figures out very quickly. And while it seems weird at first, after about a day or two, you're like, okay, I'm just going in, that's got to do my thing. And number 2, again, like camping, just a can. It's just basically a can that, again, has airflow in it. Got to make sure you got proper alignment, and that everything goes where it's supposed to. And then once that's full, it gets sealed up and put into our trash area and burnt up in the atmosphere in a cargo vehicle. So, yeah.
Not compared to number 1,
Okay.
which you drink later on.
Number 1, yes, number 1 serves a purpose, and it flows. And it's really wonderful that we can do this, right? That we have systems that allow us to recycle not just our urine, but all of the waste water and moisture that's in the atmosphere, and create clean drinking water from it. And those same kinds of techniques that we're using on the space station are being applied in more compact ways down here on Earth in places that never had clean drinking water before. And I think that's a really cool way to think about it, is that, everything we do on the space station is ultimately about improving life on Earth as well.
Shields Fadia, you had a question. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Just a second. Hi.
Hi.
I had 2 questions. One is, you said your son was 7 when you first flew to space. So how was combining your family life with being an astronaut? And 2, what advice would you give future aspiring astronauts?
Well, the first question, yeah, he was 7. And so when you think about it, the training that I did, so for as long as he was alive, I was training in one way or another. as an astronaut, right? I had gotten selected. He was born in 2002, so I'd already been, in the office for 2 years. And so he knew, his whole life was around, at least from his mom's perspective of, this job of astronaut. When I flew, it was the first time, that was about 3 years of training for that flight. And that 3 years was spent, I don't know, over 50% of the time out of the country, training at our partner facilities as well. So, 4 weeks in Russia, 4 weeks at home, 4 weeks in Germany, home, back and forth over that 3-year period. And I was very fortunate to be able to bring him with me on some of those trips, but also along the way to bring him in and, when it was fun kind of training, when we were doing spacewalk training in the big pool, or, learning how to use our orange suits or fly in the robotic arm, I would bring him to some of those training sessions as well. And I think the thing that anchored it was that, my husband and I both decided that we wanted him to feel like he was part of the crew. So we were going to involve him along the way and show him, introduce him to the people that I was working with, take him to these other countries and have him meet and see what I was doing, which I think was really important. And the balance really came from having a husband and having family that were supportive of me, along the way, and were willing to, step up and help me do this. That was key. And, having family that was invested as well. Second question, which was, say again. Oh, what I would say to future astronauts? Yeah, pursue it with, just with the passion for what you're curious about. Let that guide you. And if, and an astronaut as a job, the opportunity is going to open up to more and more kinds of backgrounds and experiences, which I think is really wonderful. Astronaut as a, as a way to travel in space, even as a tourist, is going to open up more and more. And so those opportunities are going to be there. But I think just really staying true to yourself and what you're excited and curious about is what leads you to those opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Jonathan,
Can I
Kanosh.
ask my question? Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
Go ahead.
So I had 2 questions. One
Let's
about
do Jonathan. Let's do one so that other people have time. Okay.
okay.
Choose one.
So in about 9 days, the Crew Dragon Resilience is going to lift off to the ISS, and it's going to take about 8 hours before docking, and then upwards of several hours after hard capture before hatch opening. Why does the process of verifying the seal take so long, and can we look forward for it to shorten with the proliferation of commercial space travel?
So yeah, I'm very excited about this flight. I mean, if you followed along with the first, with the demo flight where Bob and Doug flew that mission a few months ago, both of those guys were in my astronaut class. So it's like, watching your family members fly to space. The 4 people that are flying on the 14th are friends and classmates as well. And just really exciting to see this happening in this new spacecraft. And I'm going to be really lucky. I get to go over to Kennedy Space Center to do some of the commentary for NASA for that mission. So that's going to be really, I'm just so excited about it. But the timeline, the 8 hours that they're going for right now, just to kind of chase the space station down, that should shorten over time, I would think. There's still going to be an amount of time that's required no matter what, depending on number of orbits that you have to go. They'll probably get it down to about 6 hours, like the Soyuz spacecraft is now on its shorter docking missions. But that time for the seals to equalize, and that's really what's happening, is you have these 2 spacecraft that have come together, right? And now you have this space in between their hatches that was at vacuum. And now you have to make sure that that's all equalized to the pressure inside of the Dragon and the pressure inside the space station. And it just takes the time it takes, because you don't want to do it too quickly, because you could damage the structure of the hatches or the station. And so they have a speed that they can do that at that allows them to safely bring those hatches to equilibrium and then open it without any problem. But the time to get to the station should shorten up a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
You're welcome.
It's cool to hear young people asking these technical questions.
And Jonathan,
Matar.
thank you for the, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you for the beautiful backdrop that you had too. That was gorgeous.
I think that was another guy.
Another
Okay, sorry.
Jonathan.
All right. Well, we like looking at you too. Sorry.
Is Elia Matar here? So Elia wrote an interesting question. Have you ever seen flashes of light when your eyes were closed? Because on the ISS, you're not protected from particles coming from the sun. Another interesting technical question from...
Yeah, really, really interesting from the standpoint of, that the whole radiation question is interesting overall in terms of how we live in low Earth orbit, what's going to happen to us when we go back to the moon and settle there permanently. And, for a lot of you on today, the ones that may, be the ones that are heading out to Mars. And those little flashes, because of these particles, it's interesting because it happens, or maybe as individuals, we notice them differently. I didn't notice a lot of it, but I did every now and then. And it is, you've got your eyes closed, you're, getting ready to go to sleep, and you get these little, just like these little tiny little, looks like little stars almost moving in your eyes. And you realize that that might not be such a great thing either. But these are things we're learning to deal with as well.
Okay. Itai, do you want to pick any other question? You're muted. I'll ask another one until he unmutes himself. Itai Marlov. Is Itai Marlov here?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, cool.
Hello.
It might sound a little bit weird, but I really wonder. Many astronauts who visit the International Space Station claim to have seen unidentified life forms in this station window. Did it happen to you either?
So, no. Not that I know of. Maybe they were teeny tiny small and they were looking at me, but I didn't know that they were out there. No, I cannot say that I saw anything like that. But what I can tell you is every time I looked out the window, I was surprised by something. And the way the Earth looked, the way the weather was it night or day, that kind of thing, just beautifully surprising things. And then I think the thing that surprised me the most, and maybe comes the closest to what you're asking about, at least initially in my thinking, was I was floating in front of the window before going to bed one night. And it was actually, the night side of Earth when I was looking down, which is just stunning to watch. And I was there by myself, and I'm looking out, and all of a sudden this like dot of light, this streak just moves between me, in space on the spaceship and Earth. So looking down at Earth, I see this streak of light go below me. And I remember being like, holy moly, what was that? And so I floated down, flew down to the other end of the station, one of my crewmates that was awake, and I described to him what I saw, and he just kind of nonchalantly just says, oh yeah, that was a shooting star, meteorite or meteor, flying through, just like you'd see if you were looking up from Earth, to space. And I remember floating off thinking, why don't people tell you you're going to see these kinds of things, And then going back to the window and just floating there, looking and searching for another one. And of course, just like here on Earth, usually you don't get to see another one. That's why you have to make that wish fast on the first one. But I remember just kind of being in awe of that, thinking, wow, I never expected that. It was not anything anybody had told me about. I totally didn't expect to see it. At first in my brain flashed, what was that UFO I just saw flying out the window? And then once I knew, I wanted to see it again. And then I also was thinking, wow, I'm glad I saw that, because that means it didn't hit my spaceship and I'm not have to worry about all the air spewing an emergency with the air spewing out of my station. So yeah.
You mean that's not the one that hit your spaceship? Because others
That's not the
did.
one that hit my spaceship. Yeah. 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 That's one of the things we worry about is stuff hitting our spaceship. But when you see it, you're like, oh, good. That didn't hit my spaceship.
I mean, any once in a while, I hear about an interview. Some astronaut came back from the ISS talking about, oh, I saw a flash of light from the window. Oh, that must be a UFO.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess it's unidentified and perhaps flying as an object that we just don't know what it is. Yeah.
We have, I see a few questions by Margarita with an S. Margarita, are you here, Margarita?
Yay!
Okay.
I'm so excited.
Let's do one because we're out of time. One question.
Yeah, it's a short one, but I must mention that I feel like there's this series called The Crown, and there's an episode where Philip gets to meet the astronauts who landed on the moon, and he was kind of hoping they would shed some light on their philosophical feelings and their point of views, and they were all silly, talking about the noises and like funny stuff. So I'm sorry, I'm as excited as Philip, I guess. I just wanted to ask about the scientific experiments that you conduct in space. Can you name a few or maybe explain what exactly you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think, on Monday, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the station being occupied with astronauts. And I saw a statistic that said, in this time, over 3,000, different science experiments have been performed on the station. And some of those are repetitive. Some of the stuff that I would have done during my flight, 10 years ago, they're still continuing that to collect more data. The interesting thing to me is that any area of science that you can think of is represented in that mix in one way or another. And I think some of the ones that stood out to me, for sure, the ones where we're the science experiment, because you're just so actively involved with that. They want every output product you can provide, frozen and sent to the earth so that we can understand more and more about how our bodies are, reacting to this environment and how we can counteract, the kind of negative side of what microgravity, does to us. And the beauty of that, though, too, is that everything that we study about ourselves in one way or another is helping us, down here on Earth manage, I don't know, osteoporosis is a good example of that. Cardiac, like a muscle atrophy, those kinds of things are happening to the populations down here on the planet. And we can understand that even a little bit better because our bodies accelerate, we were accelerated in the way we respond to that in microgravity. So scientists have this really kind of, sped up view of what they want to study down here on Earth. Things like protein crystal growth, where we look at tissue and cells and in the microgravity environment, they can grow in 3 dimensions in an accelerated way that can't be done in a laboratory here on Earth. And it gives scientists a way. One experiment in particular is called AngieX, and it's a cancer therapy experiment where they're looking at how we can deliver cancer medications in a much more targeted way. Because, anybody that experiences like chemotherapy, their whole body is getting, exposed through the medication in a way to just get to that one particular area. And the way we can look at protein crystal growth and drug delivery on the space station has allowed that medication to be delivered in a much more targeted fashion here on Earth, which results in a much better lifestyle for the people being treated afterwards. Things like we have this combustion chamber on the space station where we're burning fuels, like different mixtures of fuels every day. And I always thought that was really cool because fuel, first of all, burns differently. It burns like a sphere in microgravity. And so the researchers can look at how all of the different components of the fuel are mixing and burning in a much better way than they can here on Earth, which then allows them to say, okay, I don't need as much or you know, I need more of this part of that fuel to burn it more cleanly, more efficiently. And that helps us, you know, with thrusters in space, but it helps us pollute less down here on Earth. And that's what I love about all the science, is that some aspect of it is ultimately about improving life on Earth.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm sorry, but we're out of time, and I really have to stop because Nicole has other things.
I'm sorry, guys. I could talk about this stuff forever, by the way.
So now I just want to thank you, Nicole, from the bottom of all of our hearts for taking the time to being with us and answering our questions and telling us how it is to be an astronaut and an artist now. So thanks.
And my pleasure. You know, you guys, I really, I just have to share that through the Ilan Ramon Foundation, several years back, I think it was must have been in 2015, before retiring, had the opportunity to visit Israel and participate in the conference and tour around the country and visit schools and, you know, other locations that the foundation sets up for us. And I will tell you that, and I had the chance to bring my family with me for that, my husband and son and my mom. You know, aside from traveling to space, that was absolutely the most meaningful trip I've ever taken in my life. And I really look forward to the opportunity to visit you there again.
Wow.
So I thank you for that on behalf of my family, whether you were involved or not. I thank you for that, because I honestly look forward to the chance to hopefully meet all of you in person sometime.
Wow. Thanks. I want to also thank my podcast team, Aviad Man, Itai Leon, that helped us with the questions here, and Ben Netanel. And a big thanks to Ofer Lapid, who actually introduced us and came up with the idea of interviewing you. And to the Ramon Foundation for letting us use their Zoom. They're a lifesaver. They help us every time we need a Zoom. And last thanks to you guys, the viewers, the listeners that joined us. You asked, there were some questions about where we can see this video or hear this. So this would be in our YouTube channel in a few days and in a podcast episode as well. I'll send you, Nicole, the links if you want.
Yes, please.
And I do wish that you come and visit us again one day. I'm happy to hear that that you liked it here very much. I heard a rumor that you have other relatives around the neighborhood here in the Middle East. That would be another interesting talk one day, maybe.
Yeah.
You want to say maybe do you want to say a sentence about that, just that everybody knows?
Well,
because it connects to the borderless that we talked about.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. My ancestry on my mom's side is Lebanese, and so though I, you know, all of the relatives in my family I knew were over here in the U.S. already, but you know, I think you feel a connection regardless, and that certainly, I mean, that was with me when I was in Israel that time. But I think, you know, the thing that really stood out to me on the trip was just the way society in general was already integrated within Israel itself, just beautifully representing just kind of the planet. And I don't think people necessarily understand that, and that's a very special thing to have going on there. So. And I'm always happy to share that good word. But I look forward to traveling back one day. And thanks everybody for participating today. I love the questions. There were some new ones, which is always a treat.
So, you're all welcome. You're all welcome to unmute yourself and say thank you. And I just wanted to say on my behalf, Eyal Ben-Zaav, thank you very much for thanks for having you here with us in our podcast, Al-Halal.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys, for including me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.